Hi and welcome to Terry Talks Movies. This time around, I've got a couple of body horror science fiction movies for you. One from 1979 and one from 2024. And I wasn't going to do the second one for this video. I was going to save it for another video. But then I realized it matched so well with the first movie I was going to talk about that I couldn't not put them into a double feature. If the light looks strange here, it's because I'm recording this at night time, and that's why I'm drinking espresso coffee in the evening, which I don't normally do. First movie is a David Cronenberg joint, so you know it's going to be kind of science fictional, kind of body horror, and guaranteed to be icky because it's a 1970s David Cronenberg movie. This one stars Oliver Reed and Samantha Eggar, and it's a little piece of deliciousness called The Brood.
They come from the unknown, and they're here now, hiding, waiting to strike. You can feel their presence all around you.
The Brood came from an interesting point in the life of David Cronenberg because he was going through a divorce at the time, and he'd heard about Kramer versus Kramer, another movie which came out in 1979, and decided he didn't like the sound of that. So what he would do is he would do a movie about a couple experiencing a divorce who would get a pair of actors to play the couple who resembled him and his ex-wife, and he would make it really gooey and body horror because he's David Cronenberg and that was what his gig was at the time. The Brood also stars Art Hingle as the husband of the piece, Samantha Eggar plays the wife, and Oliver Reed plays a guy called Hal Raglan, who's a very odd therapist who has the wife, whose name is Nola, at his establishment, at his institute, in order to help her deal with a whole bunch of childhood trauma caused by the abuse she suffered at the hands of her mother. The husband, Frank, played by Art Hindle, is really concerned because Nola gets visitation rights with their young daughter, whose name is Candace, and Candace comes back one day from a visit with her mother over the weekend, and she has scratches and lesions on her back. So he knows that something's going on and there's some kind of abuse happening there. So they've got lawyers involved and all that kind of stuff, and he starts trying to get to meet his wife, who he hasn't seen while she's in therapy, in order to go, what the hell's going on? Now, Raglan has an institute which does an unusual kind of therapy called psychoplasmics, which sounds a bit like a new wave band, but it isn't. His therapy is to get people to express their anger from their suppressed trauma. And it's kind of like anger therapy, like Synanon's anger therapy, but it's taken to a greater extreme. And he kind of hypnotizes the patients and takes on the role of their abusers in order for them to deal with the abuse that they suffered at the hands of whoever their abuser was. Here's the problem with psychoplasmics. The trauma that people experience and their rage at the trauma manifests in changes to their body. Frank meets an ex-patient of Raglan's who's gone through the therapy, and his therapy has manifested his trauma as an enormous lymphoma on his neck, which is killing him. So the trauma can induce changes to physiology, including runaway cancers. Not what I would suggest is a good result for a therapy session, but this is, of course, a David Cronenberg movie. Frank also leaves his daughter to stay with his ex-mother-in-law, Juliana. And while Candace is being looked after by Juliana, while Frank goes and about his daily business, Juliana is attacked and killed by something which resembles a small child in a hoodie. He comes back and Candace has been taken in by the police, all that kind of stuff is happening. And Candace doesn't remember any of it. She's in a traumatic state where she hasn't allowed herself to understand and express the things she experienced. That then brings the ex-husband of the mother-in-law, a guy called Barton, played by the wonderful Henry Beckman, who was one of the great Canadian character actors of the 20th century. Really good character actor, did a whole bunch of different roles, wrote some books on how to become a character actor, giving good grounded advice to people who wanted to do that. Henry Beckman's Barton is traumatized. He still loves his ex-wife, even though they broke up 10 years ago. He's shattered by the fact that his daughter's in therapy now, and that he didn't do more to help her when she was experiencing the abuse at the hands of his wife. So this guy is really probably one of the best acted characters in this movie. And he too gets attacked by one of these things. Cronenberg doesn't hold back on the brutality of the attack. And he actually essays some interesting things about these characters. One, they're very athletic, and he actually had child gymnasts to play the characters. And two, he shows you that they're very strong because one of them picks up a glass paperweight and throws it through a wall. So without telling, he shows how strong and how angry and how murderous these, whatever they are. Interestingly, one of them gets trapped in a closet and dies. And there's an autopsy which reveals that these things are not human. They have a great big fleshy sac on their back from which they get nutrients, and when the nutrients run out, they die. They don't have teeth. They have sharp gums. They don't see things the way we do. They don't have colour vision. And their vision is probably blurry. They're very strong. They don't have any genitalia of either sex. And they don't have a navel. And then Candace gets kidnapped by two of these things because they look like school kids. They smuggle themselves into the kindergarten where Candace, the 5-year-old, is, and take her back to the institute that Raglan runs. And Raglan knows that they exist and knows what they are. And he also knows that they are, in a sense, Nola's children. They are the physical manifestations of her anger and rage at her abuse.
Are you ready for me, Frank? I seem to be a very special person now. I'm in the middle of a strange adventure.
I want to go with you wherever you go.
Do you?
Yes.
Then look!
The Brood.
And we get to a really interesting scene at the end where Nola is shown giving birth to one of these creatures, and they basically start as cysts on her body and grow to about that size, and she breaks open the cysts and the creatures are born, and then they grow to childlike size. And that's an incredible scene in this movie, and Cronenberg doesn't shy away from it. And Samantha Eggar, playing against type, got to remember she was the female lead in Dr. Dolittle, the original version. She shows the deep insanity of this woman and the deep trauma that she's experienced, which has led her to use the psychoplasmics and to start manifesting her trauma as basically creepy little murderous things, kind of like the dwarf in Don't Look Now. This movie's fantastic. I like it so much, and I like what Cronenberg did with it. It's got that kind of Canadian winter setting that Cronenberg really liked in his 1970s movies. It's got some good acting in it. Oliver Reed playing Raglan is quite good. It was at a stage of his career where his drinking was starting to affect his options. And yet he does have a really good role in Raglan, playing somebody who's obsessed with his ideas about how trauma should be dealt with and manifested. He's redoubling his efforts when things go wrong, and ultimately has ended up with this woman who is making basically rage children because of her trauma. And he does a good job. Him and Samantha Eggar have worked together before. They grew up in the same part of England, in fact in the same town. And so there's a nice rapport between those two. Art Hindle playing Frank the husband is okay. He's not great in it. He's got two very, very good actors to go up against, plus Henry Beckman playing the father-in-law. So there's not a lot of opportunity for him to shine as an actor in this one. But it does have that Cronenbergian thing where you kind of see the escalation of things and you see the weirdness happening and the weirdness escalating. And the fact that in the world of Cronenberg movies, human beings have a way of changing their physiology and their physiognomy and changing even the way they reproduce based on, scientific experimentation. Cronenberg was never scared of transgressing and never scared of taking things in a direction which may nauseate some people. But The Brood works. It's got a great sense of escalation. It starts out small with a guy trying to deal with his marriage breakup and the fact that he marries somebody who has deep psychological issues. And the marriage is broken up because he made the mistake of thinking he could help her, where what the help she needs is never given to her anywhere in the movie. And there's also Cronenberg's anger at the breakup of his marriage and the custody battle he was going through at the time. The only thing I find problematic in the movie is the way that the conflict between Frank and Nola is resolved. I think that's something that can be seen in a certain way and can be seen as a little bit too much. Now, there have been some feminist interpretations of this, which have been a little kinder to that resolution than otherwise, and I can respect them. I mean, movies like this where the things are extreme and things are talking about the relationships between men and women, and a woman finding a weird kind of power in her trauma, and because of her trauma, through, yes, being helped by a mad psychiatrist, she then manifests all of this stuff herself. And when she does, the males can't handle that female power that she has. And the twisted nurturing that Nola does for these creatures is odd and really disturbing, and probably a threat to the patriarchy as well. The Brood is one you should definitely check out if you haven't. Like I said, it's not for everybody, and I've got friends who don't like body horror, and I respect that. Cronenberg did this better than anybody else, and he did it before most other people. Yes, there are other people who kind of blazed the path for Cronenberg, people like Georges Franju in Eyes Without a Face, and a bunch of other people who did very kind of gooey Frankensteinian horror movies before this. But Cronenberg took body horror, physiological horror, to a new level. And a lot of people have built on that since then, including his own son. Brandon Cronenberg's movies definitely owe something to David Cronenberg's movies. And the second movie I'm going to talk about, The Substance, definitely owes a debt to Cronenberg as well. But The Brood works, it holds up well now. The creepy little rage babies are suitably creepy. They're strong, they're determined, they're psychically linked to Nola, so her feelings are what they feel. And so they act upon her feelings of being traumatized and being attacked by other characters in the movie. Their sensitivity to that makes them deadly when Frank and Dr. Raglan try to get a resolution to the problems that are occurring because of this manifestation of Nola's trauma. Cronenbergian horror is such a unique thing, and yes, it has led to some kind of shitty movies like this Human Centipede series. It also leads to transgressive movies that actually have something to say, as indeed does The Brood. It's about somebody dealing with a marriage breakup in a bad way and not realizing the point of view of his estranged partner and the reasons why she is who she is and does what she does. And I kind of like that. I think that's, in a sense, Cronenberg working through his own issues, but also subconsciously perhaps showing the other side of things. It makes it a really interesting film. You should have that one in your collection. If you don't, go out and get it.
People always ask for something new. It's inevitable. At 50, well, it stops.
That brings me to The Substance. The Substance is a crazy film. It's transgressively crazy. It's monstrously good. I had such fun with this afternoon. I've been hearing whispers about The Substance for a few weeks, and it was coming out in Australia. It had been at the Cannes Film Festival, and it won Best Screenplay at the Cannes Film Festival, which is no mean feat. Didn't get the Palme d'Or. It was nominated for the Palme d'Or, but it didn't get it. It's a movie by Coralie Fargeat, who made a previous movie in 2017, which I haven't seen, but I hear good things of. And Coralie Fargeat is an interesting filmmaker because she said in an interview that her influences of her filmmaking are David Cronenberg, David Lynch, Michael Haneke, and John Carpenter. A female filmmaker whose influences are those four guys is somebody who's going to make an interesting film. There's no two ways about it. I deliberately didn't learn a lot about the film, and I'm going to try to tread a narrow path when I talk about this film to not give away too many spoilers. I'll do it in general terms, but I'll try not to get to specifics. In the movie, Demi Moore plays a woman who does an aerobics TV show. She's had a career as an actress and won some awards, and now she's doing kind of Jane Fonda workout aerobics shows for morning television. She's 50. She's just had her 50th birthday. She's finding it quite tiring doing what she does. And right as she hits 50, and it's her birthday, her boss, played by Dennis Quaid, who's a real bastard in this movie, and he does do some transgressive things, One of the things to watch in this movie is the fact that all of the men in the TV industry in this movie have the power, and they're all old men. They're all old white men. The shareholders are old white men. They're old white guys, and that's quite a salient point to this. So Elizabeth gets the sack on her 50th birthday, and she sees one of her posters getting taken down on a billboard, and she's distracted by that, and she has a car accident. She's not injured, but the car accident is pretty full on in the movie. And she's in hospital getting a checkup to make sure everything's okay. And a nurse comes along and gives her a final test and does some weird things like checking her spine. And he slips into her coat pocket a USB drive and a little note saying, "This changed my life." And on the drive, it says The Substance. And there's a phone number on the other side of the drive. And she plugs the drive into her TV. And there's a little presentation about, do you want a better self? Do you want a younger version of you? Do you want to live your best life? If so, contact this number.
One single injection unlocks your DNA and will release another version of yourself.
Elizabeth does so and calls a number. On the phone, she's given an address, which is a really dingy little, almost abandoned garage. And she goes in there, and she's got a little swipe card that she's been sent in the mail, which leads her to a little locker, which has a box full of something in them called The Substance. I'm being really careful here because I want to give away enough to tease you, and I don't want to give away too much so you don't enjoy the wonderful madness that comes up. The Substance works. The Substance gives her another self, played by Margaret Qualley, the daughter of Andie MacDowell, who was also in Quentin Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Fine actress. Both her and Demi Moore give career best performances in this movie. Now, there are a few provisos in this younger self because the older Elizabeth is still around, but they have to share their lives. They each get a week living in the world. I'm not going to spoil how or why that happens. And the younger version gets Elizabeth's old job doing the aerobics thing, and she gives herself a new name of Sue.
I'm Sue.
And that's the only name she's ever had in the movie. Sue becomes an enormous hit. And I suppose this is the way for the director to make fun of mononyms, like Madonna, for instance. This woman, Sue, becomes a great big star really fast because she's young, she's beautiful. She does aerobics in very tight and very skimpy clothing. She's charismatic and she's beautiful and she's young. And she becomes a big star because basically everybody in the hierarchy of her business wants her. There's so much male gaze being mocked. And the power of the male gaze and the power of rich white men running television industry is very much addressed in this movie. And also there are a whole bunch of other issues, including how older women are marginalised in media, how women and men as well will do extraordinary things to themselves in order to continue the illusion of youth. They will inject poison into their faces. They will put neutral substances in their cheeks to give them a more rounded look. Tom Cruise, take note. They will get hair plugs and plastic surgery and brow lifts where all the skin around here is cut and pulled back and then stapled into place. They will get weird hair appliances like Sylvester Stallone. They'll get bags full of liquids put into their chests. There's just so many monstrous surgical things that people do to appear younger. And all of these get satirized in a very, very powerful way in The Substance. But things do escalate and things get worse. And there are certain rules you've got to follow for The Substance to work. You'll get 7 days off shift and 7 days on shift as Sue and as Elizabeth. There's strict rules on that. Certain other body things you've got to do. And if you don't, things start going wrong. And indeed, they do start going wrong for Elizabeth and Sue. One of the other things that the people running The Substance, who you never see, tell them is, you are both the same person. There are not two beings here. You are the one person, and that's an incredibly important thing. But Sue, being young and beautiful, kind of has a split between her and Elizabeth and becomes antagonistic to her, and then Elizabeth becomes antagonistic to Sue, and they go to war with each other, but Sue ultimately gets the upper hand. And that starts having profound physical effects on Elizabeth. And when I say profound physical effects, think Brundlefly level profound physical effects. And then the movie starts accelerating this shit until it gets to the stage of Coralie Fargeat saying to Cronenberg and saying to John Carpenter and saying to all of these guys, hold my beer, I'm going to show you shit you've never seen. And she does. There are physical horror things in this movie that go to extreme levels and then go more further and then go further again and then go further again. There's some body horror in this that goes way beyond even trauma movies, even beyond Toxic Avenger, even beyond Basket Case, even beyond John Carpenter's version of The Thing. There's stuff in here that will blow your mind, and I'm there for that. But underlying all of this is that commentary about the beauty myth and about the male gaze and about the extent that people will go to try to maintain the illusion of youth. All of that kind of stuff is very much at the core of this movie. Eventually we get to a climax which, well, it kind of makes the ending of the Stephen King movie Carrie, the Brian De Palma Stephen King movie Carrie. It makes that look like Singing in the Rain. It is just so balls to the wall, gutsy to make body horror this extreme. And then what Coralie Fargeat does is she brings it all around to an initial image at the start of the film and does it as a kind of grace note. She's taken us as far as body horror can go, and as transgressive as body horror can go, and as icky and memorable and extraordinary and unexpected as body horror can go. And then she ends up on a slightly comic grace note at the end. Yeah, people think Demi Moore and people think Margaret Qualley, people think Dennis Quaid. They think within a certain border of the kinds of movies those people appear in. And then they appear in this one where it goes totally beyond that. It goes to extremes, but not in the sense of something like Martyrs with the New French Extremity, where it goes to realistic horror and torture and things like that. This is still very much in the physical body horror stuff of The Thing and of the Cronenberg version of The Fly, and in fact things like The Brood as well. In fact, there are some good parallels between The Brood and The Substance. So it goes to those places, and then it gives little, and then pulls back a little bit. And there's a scene with Sue when she's in a lady's bathroom just before she's doing a big gig on New Year's Eve. And then what Coralie Fargeat does is takes it back to a more realistic, small-scale body horror. Before things get even worse, she gives us a little interlude of realistic body horror, and then it goes crazy. And it goes so off-the-wall bloody crazy. I was so happy with it. I'm into this kind of movie, and I love the fact that it's got an underpinning of having a strong viewpoint on certain things that happen in the real world. If you haven't seen The Substance, I think you should. I'm there for how extreme it went. A lot of people are going, well, that went too far, that was silly, that went so far, that went to ridiculous lengths, blah, blah, blah. As if putting poison into your forehead isn't going to extreme lengths. I loved trauma movies when they were out. I used to get them on VHS all the time. I owned a bunch of them. I love the Cronenberg movies. I love the horror movies that Carpenter and others did. I love this one. I'm going to get the Blu-ray at least. I may go to 4K, I may go to Blu-ray. It just depends on what becomes available. But The Substance is a movie that has something to say, and it has something to say that's worth saying. And the director, who also is the writer, found a way to say it that isn't just gratuitous. There's nudity by both actresses in this, but the nudity is not gratuitous at all. And by the way, it is interesting and kind of all credit to all three people that we have a movie where there is female nudity that it acknowledges the fact that women have pubic hair. If you haven't seen The Substance, you should see it. It's probably going to do big on streaming. It's going to do big on physical media, I think. And I think it's an important enough movie because of what it says about the illusions we have about youth and the maintenance of youth. I think it's kind of going to be, in its own way, as groundbreaking as something like Eyes Without a Face. I mean, that's a big thing to say, but I think it's justified in this case. Great movie. You should definitely see it if you're a horror or a science fiction fan for that matter. It does both. So those are the two movies. I've got The Brood with monster rage babies. We've got The Substance with a kind of Jekyll and Hyde in a weird way. The unexpected twists of it delighted me in that. So thanks a lot for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, You can also support the channel by becoming a patron at patreon.com/cherryjawsmovies or by becoming a channel member. Next up, I got some interesting things for Monday, including a Hammer movie I haven't covered yet, so look forward to that. And until then, watch some good movies, watch some bad movies, watch some transgressive horror movies. They always bring a smile to your face if you're sick like me. And I'll catch you next time.